otherwise known as Just Maria D. I'm vlogging today in my daughter's bedroom. It seems to be the only quiet light space in my house. For those of you who are new to my channel, I vlog 3 times a week. Currently, it is Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays, otherwise known as TTS. I am a homemade mum. I have home educated all 5 of my children. I currently am on my last child. I now have a university grad. I have 2 at university. I have 1 at college, and I have an 11-year-old who remains at home. Today I'd like to talk about something that comes up time and time again in the home ed community, and it is something that I have dealt with time and time again in my own personal life, and that is the concept of fear in terms of home educating. This chat today is really directed at home educators, but the concepts are transferable to parenting in general. Just because you send your children to school doesn't mean that you don't sometimes feel afraid about how you parent and the outcome of raising kids that are in line with your values, your ethics, your morals, and the type of human beings that you want to let loose on the world later on. Fear is something that we are all familiar with and experience in our lives. It can grip us suddenly in the form of panic and anxiety, or it can be that sinking, gnawing feeling that can live in the pit of our stomach day in and day out. Sometimes it feels like fear is always there. Before I go any further in our chat today, I really want to apologise if I have ever given off the impression or the air that I have never experienced fear as a parent, or that I don't feel afraid about this journey that we are on. I think the difference is here that I have come through it at the other end. I don't these days feel as afraid about home education, but I do often feel afraid about other things. And I did feel sickeningly afraid when I had my first child going through. I was in a new country. I didn't understand what GCSEs were. We have a whole different education system in Australia. So here I was with 5 children, my eldest being 14, 12, 10, 8 and a 15-month-old, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I knew how to home educate, that was fine. I didn't necessarily know how to home educate 14-year-olds, but I had no clue about the education system here. While I was settling into a new country, while I was trying to make friends, while I was trying to develop a home ed community, my husband was trying to find work, while we dealt with things like bullying in the neighbourhood, I was also left with the job of trying to figure out what home ed looked like for teen children. I'm not going to lie, that time was a really dark time for me. I was sometimes crippled with my anxiety. I went through a period of depression. It wasn't the lovely, rosy, let's move to another country experience that we had all thought that it was going to be. It was really tough. And so fear was something that I was very familiar with. Some of the questions I would ask myself were, am I crazy? Like, what am I doing? I've got these children and I have no idea what I'm doing with them anymore. I knew what I was doing in Australia, that was fine. Didn't know what I was doing with 14-year-old boys. Am I going to fail my kids? I trained as a primary school teacher, but I felt very much out of my depth with high school. And so I was asking myself all these kinds of questions. Am I going to fail? Am I not good enough? Do I have the knowledge? How am I going to get through this? Like, this is crazy. Not only am I dealing with the educational factors of having a 14-year-old, I've got a 14-year-old and he's going through 14-year-old stuff. I was asking, am I doing enough? Am I doing too much? Should they be out more socializing? Are they out socializing too much? These were the kinds of questions that were floating through my head. And then there was also comparison. But what about such and such? They're doing this thing over here and I'm not doing that thing. Do I even want them to do that other thing? I don't think I want them to do that other thing. Maybe I should want them to do that other thing that such and such is already doing. That looks good. Like, they seem happy. Their kids seem okay. Maybe I should be doing that too. But what if that other thing is wrong? And what if I'm going to fail them? What if they're going to end up stupid and socially inept? I might as well start buying shares in a counselling clinic right now, because I'm seriously screwing up my kids, because I'm not doing it the way that everybody else is doing it. I'm muddling through doing it my way. Deep breath, deep breath. Some days that conversation in my head was relentless. Some days it was there from the minute I got up in the morning to when I lay my head down on the pillow at night, and then I would be dreaming about how I was screwing up my kids as well. So I get it. I've been there. I've heard those voices. I've had those conversations. Some days it left me feeling physically sick to my stomach. Some days I was so paralyzed by that fear that all I wanted to do was roll myself up into the fetal position and rock. The responsibility of what I had taken on, as well as the other pressures and stress in my life that I was feeling at the time, just felt too great. So there were 3 things that I learned about fear during this time. The first one is that everybody feels it. I know that it's really easy when you are in the depths of your own fear and panic and anxiety to think that this thing is just happening to you, but it's not. We all feel it. And when we can manage to raise our head above the wall of fear for just a little bit and have those kind of conversations with people, we start to see that even the people in our lives that we think are the most successful often have times where they feel afraid about the way their life is going, or the decisions they're making, how they're raising their children, how they're doing at work. And so it is something that is always there for everybody. Knowing this fact really helped me, because I could look at people that I thought were successful in my life and say, wow, they feel it too. In understanding that, I grasped the concept that fear wasn't unique to me. And what that did for me was to stop me feeling so isolated, in that I was alone in these emotions and these worries that I was having. It stopped me feeling like a failure because I was feeling those things, because even the most successful people in my life were feeling those things from time to time as well. And it helped normalize what I was feeling. So no longer did I feel like a freak because I was having these feelings, because I understood that other people around me were having them too. So not only did it start to normalize my feelings, but it also helped me to build connections with other people. Sometimes when we hold on to the things that we are afraid of and we make them just about us, it actually stops us from forming connections with other people. And that's really what authenticity and empathy and sharing our stories with other people does. When you share them with good people that have got your back, it helps us to understand that we are not alone and that other people feel those things too, and they can empathetically relate to that and help us, and we can help them. Feeling fear does not make us weak, it makes us human. The second thing that I learned is that fear is always going to be there. It never goes away. I kept waiting for the magical day where fear would ride out of town on a unicorn, but it just never happened. So what I did was I started to do some reading about fear and the importance of it in our lives. We are always going to feel it in some way, shape or form, but how deeply and how much we allow it to control us is somewhat in our hands. We do have the power and capacity to start to let fear work for us rather than become a slave and be owned by it, when we understand its function and its role in our lives. And the third point that I learned about fear was I had to feel the fear and do it anyway. I had to meet my fears head on. And so I had to sort them out into irrational fears and rational fears, things that I can't do something about and the things that I can do something about. And this helped me to slowly start to take control back of my life and to empower myself in how I was feeling. And so in terms of home education, I'm always going to be afraid of something. Even with Joseph, even though I know that the journey works, even though that I know home education works, there are times that I still have that niggling feeling of self-doubt about my ability, but also am I doing the right thing in terms of the fact that he is autonomously educated. So that fear is still there. However, what I do now when I feel that fear is I say, okay, are there things within this that I want to change? Or are these feelings just sort of irrational fears that are just floating around my body and making me feel like crap? Because if they're things that I'm genuinely worried about, so for instance, he might need to do more handwriting, that is something I can do something about. So that fear that I'm feeling and that feeling of sickness that I've got inside me, when I start to tease apart why I'm feeling that, I can say, okay, well, he might need to do more handwriting. And that is something we can do. We can build that in. That is an easy thing to fix. So it's really important to listen to our fears and learn what they're trying to teach us. That way you feel like you are empowered to do something with it. It gives you a bit of a plan of attack for moving forward. And secondly, it helps you work out the things you can and can't do something about. This little piece is something that Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love and Big Magic fame has written. She decided in her quest for being a more creative person and a better writer that she would meet her fear head on. And so she has come up with this concept, our fear being like driving in a car, that where we should be in the driver's seat and fear is actually our passenger here. So it's always going to be there, it's always going to be along for the journey, but we are actually in the driver's seat. But what happens is so often is that we become the passenger in our lives and we sit over here and we let fear drive us around rather than us working with our fear and learning from it, embracing it and going forth with it, acknowledging that it's there, but actually we are the ones that are in control and we've got this thing and we can do this thing. So I'll leave you with that now.
I'm going to change the words of this piece by Elizabeth Gilbert. So wherever you hear the words home education, please know that Elizabeth's original words were creativity. But for the purpose of this exercise, I want you to think about your fear in terms of how you home educate. Dearest fear, home education and I are about to go on a road trip together. I understand you'll be joining us because you always do. I acknowledge that you believe you have an important job to do in my life and that you take your job seriously. Apparently, your job is to induce complete panic whenever I'm about to do anything interesting. And may I say, you are superb at your job. So by all means, keep doing your job if you feel you must. But I will also be doing my job on this road trip, which is to work hard and stay focused. And home education will be doing its job, which is to remain stimulating and inspiring. There's plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us, so make yourself at home. But understand this, home education and I are the only ones who will be making any decisions along the way. I recognise and respect that you are part of this family, and so I will never exclude you from our activities. But still, your suggestions will never be followed. You're allowed to have a seat and you're allowed to have a voice, but you are not allowed to have a vote. You're not allowed to touch the road maps. You're not allowed to suggest detours. You're not allowed to fiddle with the temperature. Dude, you're not even allowed to touch the radio. But above all else, my dear old familiar friend, you are absolutely forbidden to drive. Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic.